So I know I said at the end of Obscure Kart Racers 2 that I had my fill with kart racers for the time being, but let's all be honest with ourselves, we all knew this video was going to end up happening. Besides, that was 2020 me, and 2021 me says, let's make this a trilogy. In the off chance you need a refresher, last year I did 2 videos on various obscure titles in the kart racing genre, one of my personal favorite gaming genres of all time. I played older ones, I played newer ones, I played some underrated gems, and I played some utter garbage. There's been a wide variety across the 12 kart racers I've tackled across these 2 videos. And because old habits die hard, I'm here to do it all yet again. I've got 6 more lesser known kart racers here today, from various console generations and of varying quality, so I imagine this ought to be fun. Maybe more so for all of you rather than me with some of these games, but that's just come to be expected with this type of video. I played Eminem's kart racing in the first one of these for crying out loud. With that said, let's not waste any more time and get right onto this wild ride. So to start things off, we're actually going to take a look at something I've been meaning to talk about for quite some time. You know how there's been a bit of a trend of indie crossover games, particularly of the Smash Bros style fighting game variety? You know, stuff like the super fun Indie Pogo, the ill-fated Bounty Battle, the upcoming Framemakers, or heck, even just indie guest appearances with games like Rivals of Aether, or even Smash Bros itself. Well, what we have here is the kart racer equivalent to that, and it's called Super Indie Karts. Developed by a studio known as One-Legged Seagull, the Super Indie Karts is a big indie crossover kart racer currently on Steam Early Access. Though as far as I'm aware, there's been no real estimate shared for when its full release is going to be. Super Indie Karts takes a big inspiration from old school Mario Kart games, and I don't mean that in the way that other kart racers do. I mean it's essentially an indie-themed mix of Super Mario Kart and Mario Kart 64. Now I don't mean this as a negative, it's actually pretty cool that it went this very specific direction, especially since much of its character roster are all from sprite-based games already. Now I'll admit that there's a fair number of characters in this lineup that I'm not familiar with, but there's still a nice variety of drivers from a nice variety of games. And hey, there's still some pretty notable titles being represented, such as Guacamelee, Freedom Planet, ToeJam and Earl, Duck Game, one of my personal favorites, and even Cannibals, the game that helped popularize the now incredibly prominent Endless Runner genre. I also think it's kinda cool that each character stays relatively faithful to their source material looks in this game, even if the game does sacrifice a consistent art style because of that. Though at least it's not overly distracting that all these characters look different art-wise from one another. Now gameplay-wise, as I noted earlier, Super Indie Karts takes direct inspiration from the first 2 Mario Kart games. In fact, it largely plays like Super Mario Kart does, with its initial lineup of tracks all taking a similar structure to what you would have seen in that game, though we'll get back to tracks shortly. And while it does take a lot out of Super Mario Kart's book, I can very fortunately say that it doesn't just copy-paste it and call it a day. That is to say, it actually plays well. Would that be considered a hot take? I don't know, the original Super Mario Kart hasn't aged particularly well, but I digress. Super Indie Karts does have the same sort of slippery style of control scheme as its inspiration, but it does execute it better, especially with the inclusion of elements like a more modern style drifting system. You very rarely feel like you're out of control or anything while playing, and that combined with its great sense of speed as you hit boost panels or use boost power-ups, does make the gameplay feel pretty satisfying. That said, what's a kart racer without opposition? And in this game's case, the AI are strangely inconsistent. I played through every single Grand Prix the game currently has to offer on 50cc, and in the flat Super Mario Kart style tracks, the AI weren't really the brightest. Winning races on these tracks was pretty easy to do. But once on the Mario Kart 64 style 3D tracks, the AI suddenly had extreme rubber banding, making it way harder to keep that lead. And again, this was on the same difficulty, so I'm not entirely sure what went on there. Oh well, it's an early access game. I imagine it'll be tweaked before the game's full launch. So on the topic of tracks, I think that's where the game is at its strongest. As said before, the game has a mix of flat tracks and 3D tracks, the 3D tracks being a more recent addition. When I first played the game, it only had the flat tracks, and I do think they're quite good. Each one plays around with some interesting gimmicks based on the games the tracks are themed after. Some are simple, such as the game's equivalent to coins being in these glass plant things of sorts on the Freedom Planet tracks, but 2 tracks in particular stand out with their gameplay gimmicks. The first is the track based on the game Runbow. Basically, the road is coated in multicolored stripes, but throughout the race, the sky changes color. Whatever color the sky is, every stripe on the track of that color is now a pit, requiring not only use of that hop button, platforming in a racing game, what? But for the player to carefully navigate and strategize as the sky colored cycles. One of the 3D tracks does this as well, and both tracks are 2 of the best in the game. The other gimmick that really stuck out to me was the one for the track based on the game Ink. The minimap doesn't show the actual layout of the track, and when you start, the track is largely a void with a few paint splatters here and there. As you race, your car is essentially painting the road, revealing the track as you progress. As you can see, these tracks tend to get really creative with their gimmicks, which I very much appreciate. Now the 3D tracks as a whole don't quite have as as many crazy gimmicks, but with the whole 3D element, they get a lot more creative with the actual track layout, creating their own unique experiences in their own cool way. Also, I get the feeling that the devs are a big fan of synthwave, because basically all the menu music is synthwave music, and alongside the indie game tracks, there's a lot, and I mean a lot, of synthwave themed tracks. Not that I'm complaining, I'm a big fan of the aesthetic myself, it's just an interesting choice is all. But yeah, not much else to say really. Super Indie Kart is a pretty simple kart racer, but quite a fun one with clearly a lot of love put into it. And to think this is still a work in progress, we're still going to be getting more characters and tracks further down the road. Pun not intended. Oh, and there's also a 200cc mode. You can probably imagine how chaotic that is. Actually, having said that, I am kind of in the mood for something more fast-paced. Those tend to be quite fun, if a bit crazy. But you know what? What the heck? Let's play something crazy. I really should choose my words more carefully. So yeah, anyone remember Crazy Frog? That out-of-nowhere sensation from the 2000s? To those who don't know about him, first off, I apologize for introducing you to him, and secondly, he was, well, a sensation across the 2000s, after the character's introduction in a cover of the song Axel F and its accompanying music video. Throughout the decade, there was dozens, and I mean dozens, of songs covered with this character, from Every Time We Touch, to We Are the Champions, to Ice Ice Baby, to name just a few. And while he initially vanished at the turn of the decade, he apparently was brought back literally last year. Of all years to revive Crazy Frog, of course it was 2020. But let's focus on the 2000s for now. In 2005, a Crazy Frog racing game was released, which, while a bizarre idea, also does kind of make sense genre-wise for a Crazy Frog game. The Axel F music video largely focused on a vehicle chase after all. Now this game was actually exclusive to the UK and Australia, but unfortunately for me, a sequel came out in 2006 that did get localized, under the name Crazy Frog Arcade Racer, and I just so happened to find a copy of it recently at a local secondhand game store. Fun story on that note, one of my older sisters insisted that I pick up this game for the sake of reviewing it, and that was what actually inspired me to do this very video you're watching right now. So for that, I thank you, Crazy Frog Arcade Racer for the PS2. And that's a sentence you will never hear me willingly say ever again. And no, rewinding the video does not count. Well, nothing screams confidence for a game's quality quite like its title screen being the exact same collection of PNGs as its box art. Also, I hope you really like both Axel F and Crazy Frog sounds, because Axel F's the game's go-to song for all the menus, and every selection made on the menus is followed up by a Crazy Frog sound effect. Okay, also, I'll give the game this. For being released in the age where specific music videos would have still been hard to access at any time, having two Crazy Frog music videos bundled into the game is kinda neat for those who want to watch those whenever. And before anyone asks who'd want that, do keep in mind that the Axel F music video on YouTube has over 2 billion views. Okay, wow, I was not expecting this game to have as many characters as it does. I didn't keep up with Crazy Frog much, so I only really knew about Crazy Frog and the drone characters. Characters like this rapping Grim Reaper or this evil chef scientist guy I never even knew existed until playing this. Also, Crazy Frog goes by his original name of the Annoying Thing on the character select screen. Kind of a neat touch. I do also like that they have him levitate driving like he does in the Axel F music video. Again, neat touch. So with this being a licensed racing game in the 2000s, you'd expect this to be a Mario Kart clone, but it actually isn't. It does have some kart racing elements like item boxes, but gameplay-wise, it actually plays more like, of all games, F-Zero. The track design, the ridiculously fast pace, everyone's vehicles all hovering, this is basically an F-Zero clone. And outside of indie spiritual successors, that's not a sentence I ever expected to say about a video game. Now granted, this does beg the question of if it technically counts as a kart racer, since F-Zero's not a kart racer. Well, like I said, it does have some kart racing elements, but also, when else am I going to talk about this game? I think I can let it slide here. And you know what? To give credit where credit's due, it's not an outright terrible F-Zero clone. On paper, at least. It does have the same sort of exhilarating speed that this style of racing game is known for, and the track design is competent at least, barring a few weirdly designed parts in some of the tracks. Honestly, this game is almost at a state that it can be considered at the very least decent. There's just one simple problem. It controls like garbage. The turning in this game is far too sensitive. Even just tapping left or right, you go far too much to that direction. So you're bound to bash against the walls a lot in this game. And in a game with the speed and crazy track design of something like F-Zero, that's an immediate way to ruin everything, which is the case here. Though it's not the only factor going against it here. Remember what I said in Obscure Kart Racers 2 about the importance of clear communication with power-ups in a kart racer? Well, this game doesn't pass that test. Some are better about this than others, but there's a fair number of power-ups where I just have no idea what they do, like these two drone things. And speaking of Obscure Kart Racers 2, rubber band AI tends to be a problem in this game as well. And with the awful controls this game has, it's not hard to fall behind. On top of that, there's one gameplay aspect that kinda confuses me. On the bottom left, there seems to be a health bar of sorts, as when you get hit by items or fall from a large enough jump, the bar goes down. Yes, this does mean there's literal fall damage in a racing game. Except, as I found out when testing what happens when it reaches 0, nothing happens when it reaches 0. I got to 0 during one of the races, but I never retired or even got a lower max speed or anything, so I don't entirely get the point of the health bar. Also, hope you like Crazy Frog music, because every track's theme is a Crazy Frog cover, and it doesn't take long to get annoying, or in some cases, uncomfortable. Some of the cover songs featured in this game definitely don't seem appropriate for an E-rated game. And before you ask me to show an example, I'm not playing Crazy Frog music because I would definitely get a copyright claim on this video for doing so. So yeah, if you couldn't tell, Crazy Frog Arcade Racer's not particularly good. If the controls were better, this would probably be a decent, if quite flawed, racing game. But those controls definitely push it over the edge. Hey everyone, mid-editing Ben here, going off script for just a brief moment to share something I just discovered about Crazy Frog Arcade Racer while I was editing. It is a reskin of the original game that didn't get localized. It's not just like a sequel, it's copy-paste with a new coat of paint. And to give you an example of what I mean, this is the first track from the original game, and then this is the first track from the one I played. Look at the mini-map. They're exactly the same. And the same thing applies with the second track. Their maps are exactly the same. So yeah, not only is this a poorly controlling F-Zero clone, but it is literally a clone of itself. Oh, the things you learn when you're making videos. Okay, time to get back on script. That said, there are a few other modes to take a look at before we wrap up. There's two non-racing minigames here. One's a pinball minigame, for lack of a better term, where you keep Crazy Frog's momentum going and hope you can destroy all of the drones. I lost with only one drone left, rip in peace. And because this is mid-2000 shovelware, a Dance Dance Revolution minigame set to Crazy Frog music. Both minigames are just kinda but in the DDR minigame, if you time your button press poorly enough, Crazy Frog disintegrates! And he does so every time you do this. I take it whoever implemented this part of the minigame didn't like Crazy Frog. And finally, the last mode in the game is a chase mode. Fitting, given the premise of the Axel F music video. It's basically just a see how many laps you can do before your health drops to 0 challenge. Also, yeah, the health bar reaching 0 actually does something in this mode. But hey, now you can recreate the Axel F music video yourself, since one of the tracks is based on the city from that music video, complete with Axel F playing in the background. That's actually kinda cool, to be honest, and I just fell through the world. Okay, I think I'm done here. Next up, for a bit of a palate cleanser, okay, very much a palate cleanser, we have a more recent title in the genre, an indie kart racer known as Meow Motors. I had seen this game on both the PlayStation Store and the Switch eShop in the past, but never gave it much thought. But while looking for potentially good games to add to this video, you know, to balance out playing stuff like Crazy Frog Arcade Racer, I saw this game get brought up in a video about the best kart racers that aren't Mario Kart, and its gameplay had me intrigued, so I gave it a go. Now, would I agree with the idea that it's one of the best kart racers that isn't Mario Kart? Admittedly, no, but I do think it's a pretty good game. So the game's story is pretty simple. There's this racer cat named Rocky who signs up to compete in this racing championship. But during his first race, he gets absolutely destroyed by this Racer X style competitor known as Master Duke, who proceeds to steal his racing helmet. Jerk. From there, it's now Rocky's goal to win the championship and get back at Duke. I wasn't kidding when I said it's pretty simple. Now, even though Rocky's the main character, you're given access to a multitude of racers to play as while progressing through the story mode, each with their own special advantage. And even though each racer has their own designated car, you can mix and match which racer and car combo you go with. Now, with that said, the first thing of note with this game, it's got a lot of charm. Even just on the racer select screen, these characters' animations just ooze personality. The character Lucky in particular is my favorite. Look at this precious child. I love him. And not just because his name is Lucky, though that is a very funny coincidence. As for the gameplay itself, it does follow the standard car racing formula, but provides its own little twists, particularly in how drifting and power-ups work. Now overall, the game does control quite well, but drifting took a while to get used to, since it functions unlike any kart racer I've ever played. You tap the brake button while turning to start a drift, but instead of holding the button or even holding the control stick in the direction of drifting, you completely let them go and let your racer just go, using the brake button and control stick to make slight adjustments to your turn as you drift. I wouldn't say it's necessarily a bad drifting system, but man did it mess with my muscle memory of drifting in other kart racers. It's kind of reminiscent of My Sims Racing's drifting system, but even then, it still felt really weird. Now on the other hand, power-ups are a fair bit more interesting. It goes the Diddy Kong Racing route of having color-coded pickups rather than them being random, and instead of getting stuff like banana peels or Koopa shells, you get landmines, machine guns, freeze rays, a shark missile. Yeah, this kart racer's got a hint of vehicular combat in it as well, but that's not all. There's also this power meter that charges as you race, and when it's at max, you're able to use a more powerful version of a power-up if you hold the button for a moment before letting go. And we're talking a lot more powerful. And on top of that, you're actually able to toss away power-ups if you end up running into one you don't want to use. Point is, these additions make for an interesting twist on the standard power-up formula. And yeah, a lot of these are fun to use. I did get kind of sick of the shark missile though. The AI spam these like crazy. But alongside those, there's also another action meter that you fill up from hitting opponents, drifting, airtime, all that. This can be used either for boosting or for dropping oil slicks. Now yes, it may seem like there's a lot going on with these various mechanics, and what's starting out, yeah, it definitely felt like a lot. But once in the swing of things, it's actually pretty straightforward and fun to use these all. Well, I didn't use the oil slick much. I definitely preferred saving it for boosting. But still, point stands. Now for the story mode, you do end up doing more than just standard races. You also have drift challenges, where longer lasting drifts build up a multiplier that vastly increases the points you get at the end of the drift so long as you don't bump into anything, and vehicular combat challenges, where you need to destroy a certain number of racers before the timer runs out, while watching your own health bar. Depending on how well you perform in these challenges, you get stars that go into unlocking more power-ups, cars, and racers. That said, while these are fun challenges, it does start to feel a bit repetitive over time to go through these, especially with the limited number of tracks that you'll end up revisiting quite a few times. Also, story mode is how you unlock basically everything for multiplayer, so to get the full multiplayer experience, you'll need to play through the entirety of story mode. So if you're wanting to jump straight into multiplayer with this game, I've got some bad news for you. Also, it's local multiplayer only. Not that it not having online is an issue, I just wanted to give you all a heads up. But yeah, despite its rough edges here and there, Meow Motors was pretty fun, and it's got a lot of visual charm and personality to go with its interesting gameplay mechanics. I didn't end up beating it entirely for this review, due to the previously mentioned repetitiveness of the story mode, but I'll probably come back to it at some point to finish it. It's also not particularly expensive either, so if you want another modern kart race in your library, it's not a bad option, especially if you're a cat person. Definitely recommend it to anyone who's a cat person. Well, that was certainly a refreshing palate cleanser. I think I should be ready for if another cursed kart racer comes up now. Wait a minute. Didn't I bring up cursed kart racers relating to a potential Obscure Kart Racers 3 not too long ago? I have also considered ordering a copy of Action Girls Racing Online, for potential Obscure Kart Racers 3, but I don't think I'm ready to sacrifice my dignity to that degree. I guess I was ready to sacrifice my dignity a lot sooner than I thought. Yes, everyone, I did actually go through with buying a copy of Action Girls Racing. On the bright side, it didn't cost me much at all, but at the same time, there's now a copy of Action Girls Racing within my possession. Why did I think this was a good idea? To those unaware, Action Girls Racing was a kart racing game for the PS2 and Wii, developed by the notorious Data Design Interactive, a studio often considered the kings of poorly made shovelware games in that era. I actually looked at one of their other racing games just a few months ago, Billy the Wizard Rocket Broomstick Racing, which was quite easily the worst racing game I had ever played at the time. But because I clearly don't know any better, I now own one of their more known infamous games. And trust me, it won't take long to see why that's the case. Well, we're only a few seconds in, and we already have proof that this will at least be better than Billy the Wizard. When you spin the cursor, it doesn't cut off this time. I hate that I can actually refer to that as an improvement. Anyway, let's make our way to selecting our character. What am I looking at? That doesn't even look like the same artist as the one who did the title screen / box art. And at least the art there looked decent. This though, I don't know, these portraits feel off to me. Though hey, another improvement over Billy the Wizard. The characters all actually have names. Which on that note, how about that gameplay, eh? Well, to start things off, the first cup in Grand Prix mode begins with quite possibly the worst designed track I've ever seen in a racing game. You race through a high school. And I don't mean a high school themed track, I mean an actual high school. These hallways are just way too narrow for a frantic kart racer, and you are guaranteed to get stuck on something as you try to make those turns. Also, it's just got some really bad design choices in general. For example, looking at this opening bit, how many of you would think you'd have to drive through these closed doors to progress? Or another example, look, flower pickups, exit sign, maybe a secret shortcut? Nope, it's a dead end. Thanks a lot, game. And this all isn't helped by quite easily the worst controls I've ever experienced in a kart racer, let alone for tilt controls. Like, I had heard this game's controls were awful, but allow me to confirm, they're as bad as others say. The turning is unbelievably stiff, making what should be pretty easy turns practically impossible without crashing into a wall or pillar or locker. Granted, this is still an improvement over Billy the Wizard's moving by tilting the nunchuck, but even then, this somehow makes Eminem's kart racing look competent. Heck, even with Eminem's kart racing's narrower tracks, they never got this bad. Though here's the funny thing, none of the other tracks in the first cup are nearly this narrow, so I have no idea who decided to make this track the way it is, let alone have it be the first track. Though while better designed, I wouldn't say the other tracks are necessarily fun or memorable, and the issues with the controls still apply to these areas. Power-ups aren't all that helpful either. For one, you use them by shaking the Wii Remote. Yep, it's that kind of game. They also do the upgrade system that Diddy Kong Racing does, but the differences between a standard power-up and a fully charged power-up don't feel that drastic. Now granted, there is a bit clearer communication and power-up functionality, but a few I still don't entirely get, like the parasol. Beyond the horrible controls though, this game is honestly just kind of boring. I know this is only 50cc, but even then, this game feels slow. Probably a benefit given these controls, granted, but it just makes each race feel endless. Now I wasn't able to win the cup and unlock the next one, and part of me didn't want to try again, but I was curious to what the layered tracks would be like. I don't know, let's give this another go, and I fell through the wall. I think that's a good sign that it's time to stop. Actually, you know what? I know I just had a palate cleanser, but I think I need a breather from all these weirder kart racers. An indie crossover with a mishmash of art styles, a Crazy Frog themed F-Zero clone, a cat-filled vehicular combat game, whatever action girls with a Z are. We've had a really strange collection this time around. I think what I could really use at this moment is just a plain old kart racer. Nothing out of the ordinary, nothing bonkers, just a kart racer. You know, I only have myself to blame for this. So here we have Kart Racer. Yeah, just Kart Racer. This almost feels fake, to be honest. Like, this looks like a game you'd see in a game store in a movie or show where the producers can't get the rights to actual games to have on their shelves. But no, this is real. And to make things even more interesting, this game was published by Nordic Games. As in, the Nordic Games that bought out THQ. To be perfectly honest, I have no idea what to expect with this game, so let's hop right in. Alright, so let's start by typing in my name on a keyboard with an overly sensitive pointer. Oh sweet, you can use the D-pad too, that's much better. There we go, I feel like that's a fitting name for right now. Oh geez, we start off really limited at first. Only one card and one track to choose from. Well, I guess we have some unlocking to do. Alright, first race. Let's put the pedal to the metal. And I'm wiped out already. Alright, off to a good start. So as you can see, the title is quite literal with the gameplay. It's a go-kart simulator. The catch though? It's a very bad one. And somehow one with even more stiff turning than Action Girls Racing. Seriously, I don't know if I'm missing something here, but no matter how far I tilt the Wii Remote, this is as far as the guy will turn. It makes almost every turn impossible without either slamming into the wall and spinning out, or hugging the brakes and taking the turn as slowly as possible, neither of which are ideal. And before anyone says the turning is stiff because it's a go-kart simulator, I've gone go-karting before, and it's definitely not this hard to turn. Though, as I went to find out, it actually controls better when going in reverse. Granted, you're quite a lot slower, but at least I can make these turns now. Oh, and now I'm getting shoved off the road by people lapping me. Whoops. Oh well, I'm not trying to win at this point. Oh geez, there I go again. This is oddly music. Ah! It doesn't seem like the game was too thrilled with my antics though. Once I finished lap 3 out of 5, the game told me enough was enough and ended the race. I do love that you have all these different racer names, and then in last place you just have help. I did give an honest try to win the second time around, but it didn't take long for me to realize that progressing in this game was going to be actually impossible. So after the game ended the race prematurely a second time, I took the hint and left. If you couldn't tell, Kart Racer was bad. About the same amount as Action Girls Racing. So that's 2 kart racers now that I can say are worse than Eminem's Kart Racing. I never thought this day would come. Okay, I think I've got time for one more game, and this time I want to play something that's at least decent. There's only so much of the worst that one fellow can take, and I want to end this obscure Kart Racers trilogy on a good note. And I know exactly how to do so. Everyone, here I have for you the most fitting game for me to ever be reviewing, a Final Fantasy Kart Racer. I've had Chocobo Racing on my radar for such a long time, but man, finding an affordable North American copy of this game is tough. I got lucky enough to find a copy for just over $50, and that was just the disc on its own. But yeah, I'm finally the proud owner of this strange product of the 90s, and thus it's only fitting to end off this marathon with it. So because this is a Final Fantasy spin-off, Chocobo Racing has itself a chapter-based story mode, where the inventor Sid, because what Final Fantasy game would be complete without a Sid, makes some jet boots for the titular Chocobo so he can go fast. And after winning a race against Mog, the game's resident jerk character, the two set out on a journey to find out about Chocobo's blue crystal that gives him his special power. Along the way, they meet a wide variety of characters with their own blue crystals, before discovering the surprisingly in-depth lore behind the blue crystals and how it triggered a war for power long ago. Actually, wait, this is a Final Fantasy game. Of course the kart racer's gonna have in-depth lore. Now, lore aside, it is a pretty simple journey, with it mostly being a light-hearted comedy, usually with Mog as the instigator or punching bag, and deservingly so. Mog being on the receiving end of something terrible tends to be where the game's at its funniest, like when they meet the Goblin character and he just straight up has a knife to his throat, but Chocobo and the Golem don't even bat an eye. But yeah, it's a fun story mode all things considered. A bit on the short side, but there is a reason for that, as we'll go into in a moment. Now, as for the characters, we have a pretty nice selection of creatures from the series. Chocobo and Mog the Moogle, of course, the previously mentioned Golem and Goblin. The Golem's great in the story mode, by the way. A white mage, a chubby Chocobo, Behemoth and Bahamut, and most importantly, a black mage! At long last, my time has come. Now, there are some extra secret characters beyond those, but again, we'll go into that in a moment. So gameplay-wise, Chocobo Racing is a bit by the numbers at face value, but it does have its own fun ways to spice up the formula. For one, power-ups. Quite cleverly, each power-up is based on an actual spell in the mainline games, and by collecting multiple of that power-up, you can upgrade the spell. You know, Fire, Fyra, Fyraga, like that. Yeah, I know that's how Diddy Kong Racing does it as well, but I just love how creatively incorporates that element of the RPGs. Very on brand. Though you're also able to hold multiple power-ups at one time, but you can't upgrade one power-up you're holding onto if another one's in its way. So there is some strategy with choosing which power-ups to pick up and when. Additionally, each character has their own special ability, but when selecting your racer, you can choose any of the unlocked abilities. No character is bound to what they bring to the table. Say for example, you pick Mog. You can go with his default ability Flap, which as Mog himself says in the story mode, kinda sucks, or you can give him Chocobo's Dash ability, which gives you a large boost. And that's just 2 power-ups. One temporarily improves your turning, one automatically upgrades your active power-up to max power, one just mega flares everyone, and so on and so forth. But yeah, if your favorite character of the bunch has an ability you don't like, that's okay. You can mix and match, and that's really cool. It also helps that, thank goodness, Chocobo Racing actually has good controls. It keeps it simple driving-wise, with its drift system only being for sharp turns rather than build-in boosts, but the ability system and magic power-ups both help spice up the gameplay and keep it from feeling too basic. Also helps by some pretty fun tracks, ranging from mining towns, to a floating city, to a hidden world of dragons and espers, to a Final Fantasy VIII advertisement. I think it's time to talk about the secret characters on that note. So the reason story mode is so short is because replaying it multiple times is very much encouraged, for 2 reasons. 1, after each run, you're given points to put towards making a custom version of one of the existing racers, which is really cool. And 2, after each run, you unlock a new playable character. Now admittedly, for the sake of showing off the full roster, I did dig up an 100%ed save file online since I didn't want to play through story mode 10 times. Yes, that's how many characters there are to unlock, but I'll be sure to unlock them genuinely on my own time for my own file, so worry not. But yeah, the range of unlockable characters is honestly kinda neat. There's the previously mentioned Bahamut, as well as Squall from Final Fantasy VIII, who are the only 2 unlockable characters with new abilities, but as you unlock more characters by pressing combinations of the shoulder buttons over Squall, you can access characters like Cactuar, or an 8-bit Chocobo, or Cloud from Final Fantasy VII, or Jack from 3D World Runner, or Ayabrea from Parasite Eve, or easily the most ridiculous character, the SS Invincible from Final Fantasy III. Look how fast it goes! What's also interesting about this game is how it handles game modes. Alongside story mode, it has a Grand Prix mode, though instead of having preset collections of tracks, you actually make the Grand Prix yourself, which is kinda neat. There's a 1v1 versus mode, odd that's not a full-sized race, but eh. But my other favorite mode is the relay race. Here, 2 players pick 3 racers and their abilities, and after each lap, you switch between your racers for the next lap. This is a pretty cool mode, allowing you to experiment with teams of racers and strategizing abilities and whatnot depending on the track. It also allowed me to run this little experiment. With a team of the 2 slowest characters, Jack and Cactuar, and the fastest character, the Invincible, could I still end up winning? Well, without any sort of boost ability, no. But with Dash equipped on Jack and Cactuar, yes. On a related note, I also did a foot race between Jack and Cactuar to see who would win. Cactuar won, but it did get really close. Look at them go. Another thing I find interesting about this game is both the visuals and the music. The art style goes for that mix of sprites for the characters and 3D environments for the tracks, much like Mario Kart 64 and Super Indie Karts with its newer tracks, and I think it makes for a pretty nice aesthetic in this game's case. And as for the music, the entire soundtrack consists of remixes of older Final Fantasy songs, making them better suited for a racing game. Though on the topic of music, I did honestly get a good unintentional laugh by how they used one of the series' most iconic tunes. At the start of the final chapter, when all the blue crystal shards are being reunited to access Bahamut's world, they're using Dancing Mad from Final Fantasy VI as the backing track. And I mean, it fits, but just knowing what Dancing Mad was made for makes this so much funnier to me. But anyway, that's Chocobo Racing for ya. It is kind of lacking on the content side, because as fun as the modes are, there's not a lot of variety in what exactly is done in them, no extra challenges or anything like you'd see in other kart racers, but again, it is a fun game, and one I'd recommend if you could find it at an affordable price. Or, if you have a Japanese PlayStation Network account, it is available on the Japanese PS Store as a PS1 classic. Why the re-release never got localized, I'll never know. Now there was actually a Chocobo Racing game in development for the 3DS back in the handheld's infancy, but the game did get cancelled unfortunately. However, literally days before recording for this video, word spread that Square Enix had filed trademarks for Chocobo GP and Chocobo Grand Prix in a few different countries. Don't know what will become of this, or how soon we'll see anything become of this, but it seems like we could potentially see a new Chocobo Racing game in the future. And I'm down for that. And that now marks another Obscure Kart Racers video completed. An interesting mix of pretty good and incredibly cursed this time around. Perfectly balanced, in fact. I don't think any of the games in this one quite come close to some of the better titles I've looked at before, but at the very least, Super Indy Karts and Chocobo Racing are up there in quality. And I'm still shocked that I found not one, but two kart racers worse than Eminem's Kart Racing. Though to anyone wondering, Billy the Wizard's still the worst racing game I've ever played as a whole. I also find it hard to believe that I've now done 3 of these over the past 9 or so months. But hey, you all seem to really enjoy these, and I like trying out lesser known experiences and genres I like, so it worked out. That said, I think I'm gonna end the Obscure Kart Racers saga here. There's still quite a lot of kart racers out there, yes, but there's only so much I can do with this topic before it feels like too much. So why not end it as a trilogy? Also, ending it with a Final Fantasy kart racer is way too perfect. I'll definitely do more obscure-centric videos down the road though, they're quite fun to do. But that's enough rambling from me for today. So with that said, this has been Black Mage Benjamin, and until the next video, have a nice day everybody.